Can you give an example of what needs to happen in the first 3 pages of a screenplay?
I love that because I teach a class on getting your script contest ready. And in this class, we focus on the first 3 pages and how important they are. It used to be that you needed something amazing to happen in the first 15 pages of your script. But audiences' attentions today with social media and everything online, are like much briefer. You need to grab their attention right away. Hopefully in page 1, not even page 3, For me, it's that page 1 needs to be amazing. And I always say that page needs to show either your protagonist or your antagonist in action. And by that, obviously, I don't mean giant explosion. You could be writing a dramatic piece that doesn't have that. It's more about showing who they are by what they're doing, not just describing it. I don't like slow openings where they're just waking up, going through their morning routine, and in page 3, then they leave the house and something happens. Give me something right away. Show me who they are, but what they're doing. Don't just describe it. Yes, you can get away, with giving us a description when you first introduce your character, and you're writing like their name, their age, and a little something about them. But if you're also showing us who they are, maybe they're in the midst of an interesting conversation, debating something exciting, You're showing us, oh, these are the type of characters that have a point of view. They have an opinion. So that could also be showing them in action. But I think that needs to happen in those first 3 pages. You need to show something unique. Like, for example, an exercise that I love to do with my students is rewriting the opening of Friends. If you could do that, how would you do it? Because if you actually read the pilot, which is great, and I love the show, it's an older show, Now we expect things to happen quicker. So I always tell my students, okay, so how would you get this amazing teaser and make it quicker? Well, Rachel should show up much quicker. In the actual pilot, it takes like 10 pages for Rachel to walk through those doors in her wedding dress, and everything clicks for everyone because, Ross is into her and then the dynamics start. Because it starts pretty slow. It's good, it's funny, but it's just the other characters, they're just talking, they're sharing anecdotes about dating in your 20s in New York City, which is fun. But that could be later in the pilot. Like, you can show a little bit of their dynamics, 1 page of this like fun banter, but then introduce Rachel, which is the element of surprise. That's what we want to see. We want to see something shaking the dynamic, shaking the ordinary world of the characters. And also in action, because as soon as she walks in, then we understand, oh my God, Ross is in love with her. And he's like this jittery guy that just gets up because she's there. He opens the umbrella and like all of the physical comedy. So if you can get something like that in the first 3 pages of your script and not by page 10 or 15 like it used to be, then that's when you're grabbing your audience's attention.
Well, if we took, let's say, Breaking Bad or The Queen's Gambit, a lot of things happen in the beginning of those shows. But forgive me, going back to When Harry Met Sally, how would we see conflict within the first 3 pages? It's been a little bit, but it's a fairly tame movie. Mm-hmm. What conflict exists? What antagonists exist?
Well, I always say that the movie's Harry's movie and Sally is Harry's antagonist because he's really the one with the arc in the movie. And if you think even the title, it's When Harry Met Sally, right? Like, what happens to him, this pessimistic person that has to read the last page of a book before even starting the book in case he dies or something happens, he meets his exact opposite, the super chipper, happy personality that just clashes with him, right? She thinks that you can be friends with men. He doesn't think that you can do that, things like that. So I think that in that case, that dynamic is the way I would introduce it right away. And it kind of is there in the script. It just takes a little bit because like Harry's kind of saying goodbye to the girl who's his girlfriend at the time. But I would get to that quicker. I would just have the goodbye happen immediately in the first, quarter of the first page, and then just get them in the car, Harry and Sally, and her being like, oh, you said goodbye, and then just get to that banter. Because that's how I would introduce those characters in action, which is the way I think that you should introduce your protagonists, They should be sharing those points of view right away. So she could be, being all the chipper, and he could just bring out his ideas on like books and stuff like that. And that's how I would introduce it in the first 3 pages. Also because, when you're talking to writers about those 3-page count or whatever, it's because you want to grab readers' attentions. And one of the best ways, to get your career started is to send your scripts, to competitions and things like that. And in competitions, imagine the thousands and thousands of scripts that they get, right? It's overwhelming to even think about. And in a lot of competitions, the first round, they kind of like read the first pages. If they're not really hooked, they might pass on it. The big competitions, they're mandated to read the whole thing right away. But there's so many to go through that you're reading like that and you're like, okay, I'm not engaged by page 3. I'm not really advancing you to the next stage. So you want, to really grab that reader's attention and be like, okay, there's something interesting here. The voice of the writer, that has to come out in those first 3 pages. The protagonist or the antagonist has to be introduced in an interesting way. And that's really how you hook your reader.
Why do you say the first 3 pages have to be the best 3 pages of the script?
Because you always get a first impression. It's like, the moment you see someone, you already get an idea of who they are just by looking at them or something like that. When you get a script and you get that first page, it's like that first dance that you're having with a script, If the first page is not formatted correctly, for example, it's like looking at someone who's dressed terribly and you're getting that impression, from them. So everything needs to look good on the page. You need to know screenwriting, formatting, and that. But then, obviously, it's not just that. It's way more than that. You have to be introducing a character in an exciting way. You have to be revealing the world, the tone, the genre. There's a lot of elements that need to be included in those 3 pages. And that tells your reader that you know your story, you know your genre, you know what you're saying, you know who your characters are. And there's sort of a promise of that story you're about to tell. So for example, in that first page, I should immediately know if you're telling a comedy, a drama, a thriller, or what it is. Or if it's a mashup, a horror comedy. There should be a little bit of both in that first page. So I immediately know, what to expect when I'm reading. The world should be evident, right? Is this a world where magical occurrences happen? I hate reading a script where the magic doesn't happen till page 20 something and there's no little setup at the beginning of anything, and then whoa, I'm like taken out of the world of the story because I'm like, okay, you set up a certain world with certain rules. You can't just magically change everything without like little setups. I'm not saying a magical occurrence has to happen on page 1, but you have to set it up as a world where magical occurrences could potentially happen. Sometimes you plan something like they use crystals, they're playing with a Ouija board or something just to tell you there's something like that is okay in this world. And then obviously an interesting protagonist or antagonist, something interesting in action, maybe a twist by page 3. And then also, most importantly, your voice and your point of view have to be there as a writer. I feel like producers and contests and anyone out there who wants to read scripts is trying to discover new voices. That's really what they're trying to do. Stories are so many out there and so many writers. So what makes you the best person to tell a certain story? Because a lot of people are trying to tell the same story as you, right? That's why you can't copyright an idea. You can copyright a script, but not just your idea. It's all about your voice, your point of view. I love, for example, Juno. That's one of my favorite examples because Diablo Cody was her very first script, She won the Academy Award for this. And the story is so simple if you think about it. It's a teenage girl that gets pregnant. That has been told, I don't know how many times, but probably hundreds of times. It's a simple story. She gets pregnant. What happens? She eventually gives the baby up for adoption, But what made Juno unique is that voice. It was so impressive how Diablo Cody captured a voice of a generation in these teenagers that talked with a level of banter that had never been seen before. They were so snappy, so original. They just kept you at the edge of your seat because they were witty. They were so interesting to listen to. They had quick comebacks that just flew off the page. you know? So that makes that script unique, even though it's a story that's been told so many times. And even in that first page, you see that, you know? Juno is taking a pregnancy test at this convenience store, you know? And she's just having this banter with the clerk there about like an Etch-a-Sketch and things like that, you know, like they're trying to read the pregnancy test and he's like, it's not like an Etch-a-Sketch. You can just like change the answer. Things like that just show the point of view, that voice, so unique, the way you're describing things. And that's, you know, what you're trying to discover in those first few pages of a script. Especially in a contest, you know, they get so many submissions, producers, agents, the same. Get them that first impression that is unique and they want to keep reading. You know, you get so many scripts. When I was working, you know, at a desk at a studio a million years ago, I would just have piles and piles of scripts, you know, and I would just like glance at them at first and be like, oh, this first page looks interesting. Okay, I will read this one first, you know. So give them a reason to read your script right away and want to keep turning pages.
Which is more common, a great first 3 pages of a script or 3 bad pages of a script?
Oof, it pains to say that it's more common like 3 bad pages. I always say that out of 100 scripts, I would maybe recommend 3. That's not to say that there's nothing in the other scripts that's not salvageable. Obviously, I would say there's a lot to work with most of the times, but sadly, bad pages are more common than the first 3 being great. And it's sad because a lot of the times the greatness comes after. They're just not hooking me right away. So a lot of the times as I'm reading the script and I'm giving notes to the writer, I'm suggesting, you know, why don't you move this up to the beginning? You know, the way, for example, Breaking Bad did it. And that's one of my favorite examples when I'm talking about how to do a great pilot. Breaking Bad is a very unique case because it's technically a premise pilot, which I always say it's a no-no. A premise pilot is when basically you're telling all of like the backstory or setup and only at the end the story actually begins. And that's boring because if we're writing a pilot, what we want is a template for a real episode, right? Because we're only reading the pilot, we're not reading any other episodes, unless obviously eventually you get to write them. So what you want when you're reading a pilot is to see exactly what the style and story will be week after week, right? If you're writing a premise pilot and the story only starts at the end, then you are not really giving me a template for what to expect. With Breaking Bad, the way they did that is so unique because they cheated the system basically and gave us a flash forward at the very beginning. The pilot starts with Walter in the future, you know, in like the Winnebago and his undies, you know, running from everything that's happening, cooking meth and everything. He's recording himself for his wife and saying, this is not an admission of guilt, but I love you, blah, blah, blah. We hear the siren of the cops and everything. So we're like, oh my God, what did this guy do? You know, then cut to, and we go to the past, which is really the start of the episode and this backstory that's set up where he's, you know, a boring, depressed chemistry teacher with a teenage son, a baby on the way, midlife crisis, all of that, you know, then he gets diagnosed with cancer and all of that. Had the pilot not started with that killer flash forward, it would have been really slow paced and we maybe would not have been as hooked. So that's a great example. In those first 3 pages really hook the reader because they show me the promise of the show. This flash forward tells me, oh, okay, this show will get really interesting because this person is going to be running from the police or whatever, you know, cooking meth. And then the contrast to this chemistry teacher in the midlife crisis. And the rest of the episode kind of follows that pattern, you know, more like his day-to-day life and showing us his crisis and all of that, his diagnosis and everything. But we already know what to expect. So we're trying to find little tidbits there of like, oh my God, when is he literally Breaking Bad, which is the title of the show and the whole arc of the show, right? The 5 seasons are about Walter Breaking Bad. So we're trying to find little plans in the episode of, oh my God, when is he going to go somewhere that it's going to lead to that opening? But those 3 pages are really what sold the show, in my opinion, because, oh, that's the promise of what I want to watch.
What if I bump it up? What if I say, I'm going to give you all the good stuff in the first 1.5? Is that premature? Am I rushing it?
Oh, no, I don't think so. I mean, honestly, if you can give me a shocker by the end of page 1, that hooks me even more and I want to read more. Obviously, try to continue delivering and not just give me a twist then and then just a super passive script as it goes along. Try and give us some twists and revelations, but the sooner you can hook your audience, I think is best.
And so for your class that you do, getting your screenplay contest ready, it's at UCLA Extension.
Yes.
At grade school, by the way. And so you have people do sort of mock readings, and because I saw in the description that everyone's going to bring one completed screenplay.
So yeah, I mean, we do different sort of exercises, the same as we do sort of in my script doctoring class, obviously focus in different areas, One would be more focusing on your script and getting it contest ready. And the other, script doctoring is how you would doctor other people's scripts, But I like to get those pages, and sort of like implement all of these things and try to see how would you hook your audience sooner? How would you take what's here and work around to really reflect all of the things that we're learning, all of the things that we've mentioned, like they're presenting your character in action or delivering a twist or showing your voice, the world, the tone, the genre, all of that in those first 1 to 3 pages of your script.
And is that really what you're working on the entire?
No, it's not the entire course.
Oh.
Obviously, like we work on that a little bit, and then on other areas on how to really improve your scripts and how to, appeal to contest readers or things like that, because obviously it's not just about those 3 pages. If you're sending your script and you hope to win a contest, it's about the entire finished work, right? So we would talk about the structure, and we would talk about how the protagonist arc has to be connected to all of the turning points, and how you have to plant all of the right seeds in Act 1 that need to be paid off by Act 3. Or, for example, how you have to have a protagonist that has a clear core wound or flaw that is going to affect the way they go about their journey, right? They have to change, they have to arc, and there has to be something set up, and then we need to see tidbits of this growth, right? Maybe at the midpoint we have a step back, and then things get worse before they get better, and tracking all of these different elements to deliver a full thing, because it's, again, obviously the first 3 pages need to be amazing, but that's not your entire script. You need to deliver a complete final product, right? So it all needs to track. Whatever you set up there needs to be paid off. And I think that you need to give your audience credit, they love kind of putting the pieces together of all of this planting that you're doing in the script. So if you can plant something in those first 3 pages and then kind of deliver later and have a great payoff, then you're connecting with your reader, you're connecting with your audience, you're giving them the credit that they're putting the pieces together, creating the story that they're getting involved in, because you're giving them little things to get involved with.